Hi guys, it's Allie, and today I am going to be doing the writing process tag. I was tagged to make this video by Liz Cullen. I will leave her channel, or her video rather, linked below, and you should definitely check her out. She is a fellow booktuber slash authortuber. She makes a variety of content both in the things that she reads and also in the things that she writes. So check her out. She tagged me to make this video, and so now I'm doing it. So let's just get into the questions. Question number 1 is, what genres do you write or write in? What is the correct grammatical way of saying that? I don't know. But I am currently working on a upper YA fantasy novel, and that's kind of the typical thing that I go towards. I do gravitate more towards fantasy in my writing. However, I do also have ideas and thought dump projects in the works for a contemporary, also YA, a supernatural middle grade, a historical romance, and what is the other one I have? Oh, a retelling, which I'm not going to say a retelling of what, but so yeah, there's a lot of different genres happening in my Scrivener documents. Number 2 is, what setting gets you the most productive? For me, it depends on if I'm writing during the day or at night. If it's during the day, then I really like being next to a window because I like just having some natural lighting, and I usually will have a cup of coffee next to me. That really helps me get more motivated and productive in my work. And then at nighttime, usually I will just sit at my desk and I have some bookish candles that I got for Christmas. I can leave that video linked above because I did talk about that in my what I got for Christmas haul thing. And yeah, so I will light one of those candles, or just any kind of candle really, and that's my kind of positive motivational trigger to get me back on track in my writing. So either one of those scenarios. Number 3 is, if you have multiple story ideas, how do you go about picking which one to start on first? As I mentioned before, I do have a lot of story ideas currently floating around somewhere in my head, and I actually went through this exact question when deciding whether or not I should start writing this upper YA fantasy that I'm currently working on, or work on that contemporary YA that I mentioned before. I ended up just going based on my gut, which one was calling to me more in the moment, and also just statistically what I had more content and words written down for. I had much more stuff planned out for my YA fantasy than I did for my YA contemporary, so I ended up going with that one because it had a more solid foundation. So that is how I decide. Number 4 is, do you outline? Indeed I do. I do outline my novels. I used to be more of a pantser, I guess, because I didn't know that planning and outlining a novel was a thing when I was like 12. But yeah, so I do outline a lot, and I'm still in search of the perfect outlining structure for me. Everybody's different, so everybody, uses different formats. I did make a video, though, which I will leave linked above because I'm pretty proud of it, which is my 3-act structure video that I made about one of the most basic plot structures that there is in writing and one of the most basic outlining structures. And I'm also looking for another structure to make a video about, so if you have any ideas, anything you want to know more about, or stuff like that, then please do leave it linked in the comments because I love me some research and I would love to make another one of those videos sometime soon, so let me know. Number 5 is, do you start your first draft with pen and paper, a typewriter, or a computer? I do everything on computer because I'm basic and a modern woman. I don't know. But yeah, I do write some stuff handwritten, usually research or like thought dumping stuff. If I don't have a computer accessible to me, I will handwrite it. But I really just can't handwrite things as fast as I can think them. So I often feel like I'm missing out on words and that I'm losing my train of thought because I'm thinking something while writing something else. And so it increases the amount of just bad grammar and typos and me not finishing thoughts that I started. So it's just easier for me to type because I'm faster at typing than I am at writing. So it makes it easier for me to type exactly what I'm thinking as fast as I'm thinking it. So I do always draft in my computer. I also have Scrivener, which helps keep things more organized, so that's another benefit to being on the computer for me personally. Number 6 is, what do you do to get through writer's block? Actually, my first couple videos on this channel were about distractions and writer's block and how to kind of move past those. So I do have a lot of tips and tricks on that, but in terms of what I use the most often, I am a big fan of creating character playlists because they are a passive way to make you start thinking about your characters and your story. You don't actually have to be using your brain power to come up with these things on your own. You can listen to a song that really reminds you of one of your characters, and so then you're getting back in the zone of your story while also you are creating a writing playlist that you can then use when you actually do start writing again. So that is probably my favorite way of getting past the writer's block. Number 7 is, do you format your project ahead of time or do you wait for all of that stuff later? It kind of depends on what exactly you are meaning by formatting. I don't format in terms of like choosing my font and choosing, if there's going to be a fancy squiggly letter that starts each chapter. I don't plan all of that stuff ahead of time, but I do, as of this current work in progress, I have started writing by chapter in terms of formatting how many chapters there's going to be roughly and what happens in each chapter, because I have learned that for my own writing, I prefer to use each chapter as an opportunity to progress the story and to progress the character development, rather than just writing a huge chunk of text and then going back later and chopping it up into pieces. I prefer them to be pieces already that then string together in an effective way. That way it makes it easier for me to make sure that each chapter and each scene is kind of pulling its weight in the story. So I do format in that sense, but I don't format, I don't make it look all pretty. It's just what comes with Scrivener is what I use. Number 8 is, do you edit as you go or do you wait until you have a first draft? So until somewhat recently, I was more of a person who would edit as they go, because I am a perfectionist and I want to make sure that everything that I'm writing is strong from the get-go so that I can almost think to myself that like it's done and I can move forward. But the reality of that, I've learned, is that isn't what happens. And instead you just spend all of your time just meticulously going over sentences and paragraphs that are probably going to get cut in the final final draft of your story. So I am starting to get better at fast drafting and just getting the story all out on the page, not really worrying about if I said everything in exactly the way that I wanted to. As long as the words are on the page, I am happy, and then I can go back after the first draft and do what I feel like is really my strong suit, which is editing and looking for places for improvement and also discovering how to improve those areas. So I am a recently reformed edit-as-you-go-er. Number 9 is, after finishing your draft/manuscript, how long do you give it a break before you start going back over it, or do you give it a break at all? For me, the sweet spot of this is roughly around 2 weeks to a month. I feel like any less than 2 weeks and you haven't given your mind enough time to think about the story outside of your current draft, so you haven't given yourself enough time to think about big changes or small changes that you might not think about until you have some separation from the book. But any longer than a month, and at least for me, that increases the likelihood that you're not going to come back to it, because if it's a completed, finished draft, you might just be convinced of like, oh, well, yeah, that's done, and then not come back to it for a round of edits. So for me, roughly 2 weeks to 4 weeks, 2 weeks to a month, that's how long I would usually leave it. Number 10, is there something that you prefer to do to get you through writing, like playing music, watching TV, having your favorite drink, or food? For me, kind of like I was mentioning before, I use a lot of positive triggers, so lighting candles, drinking coffee, and also just listening to my writing playlists or my character playlists. All of those things help me. If not, then I will like read a book or something that helps me get into the writing mood as well. So yeah, any of those things really. Number 11 is, do you schedule out your writing time? Yes and no, it depends on what I'm writing. I don't have a very strict schedule in terms of when I'm writing creatively and when I'm writing for Word Hamster, my online learning community for beginning and young writers. I do spend most of my time during the week working on that because it requires a lot of work. There are a lot of scripts to write, a lot of videos to film, a lot of students' work to read, and a lot of students' work to send feedback on. So there is a lot of time scheduled during the weekdays for that because it's my job. But I also spend a lot of time on the weekends writing my actual book, and during the week too, if I have time to schedule for the specific function of writing my book, then I will do so. If I know that I'm gonna finish filming everything that I need for that week on, Thursday, then I get to use Friday as a writing day as well. So somewhat scheduled, somewhat not. It really depends on the workload that I have that week. Number 12 is, do you have word count or chapter goals for your writing sessions? Again, it kind of depends. If I am just writing because I'm motivated, then I will usually try to aim for like 1,000 words. But if I have more time to actually dedicate to writing on that day, I will usually go based on chapter goals because I do write by chapter. So I'll try to aim to finish that chapter or to get a good portion of the next chapter done, and that way I at least have some sense of progress. I'm not 100% sold on either doing just chapter goals or just word count goals. I use a combination of both depending on what I feel like is achievable for that day, and also based on just what I want to do that day. Number 13, are there any quirky things that you do to make your projects more fun? Yes, I have an entire thing in my Scrivener document under the research tab where I put all of my characters as vines, and I also do any like dumb songs that I feel relate to my characters, just really random stuff. I put them like my characters as Disney characters, my characters as Tumblr posts. I do random stuff because sometimes that's what it takes to have fun with your project. So I do have an entire thing of all of that, which once the book comes out, maybe I'll share those with you. Number 14 is, do you work on multiple projects at the same time? Kind of, yes and no. I certainly can and do often draft one thing while thought dumping and plotting another thing. I can outline and draft two separate projects at the same time. That doesn't mess me up in any way. But I couldn't draft two things at the same time. Drafting takes so much just mental work to do that I couldn't draft two things simultaneously. But certainly thought dumping, outlining, that's no problem. That's why I have so many current documents and projects on Scrivener, is because all of those things I am somewhat working on in the back of my head while I'm also drafting my YA fantasy. Number 15 is, how often do you research for what you're writing? All the time and about everything. I am a big fan of research, and I really don't think it's possible to write things without doing some level of research, unless it's like 100% a contemporary that takes place in your own hometown that you grew up in and whatever. Like, that might not require as much research. But for my historical romance idea that I have a project for, that has taken a lot of research to come up with because it's historical, so it needs to be somewhat historically relevant. And then even with my fantasy, I need to research things like, well, I don't want to say things that are going to spoil, but I've done a lot of research on different languages and different religions and different geography and things like that in order to construct the world that my characters live in. So yeah, lots of research. Lots of research goes into writing, and so I hope that you find that interesting if you are a writer. Number 16 is, how do you organize your projects? I really just have a different Scrivener document, different Scrivener project for each one of my works in progresses, and I really just use what Scrivener lets you do as my primary organizational method. I have my manuscript that is up at the top, which is separated into the different parts, the different acts, and the different chapters. And then I also have character profiles and place profiles, and also in my research tab, I include all of my thought dumping, all of my random scenes that I've written but don't know where they're going to go yet, and all of that kind of stuff. So I really just use what Scrivener has available in order to organize my stuff. I don't know how I would organize it otherwise. Number 17 is, do you reward or punish yourself for achieving or missing out on your writing goals? I do reward myself sometimes if I'm having a particularly stressful writing day and I just want to reward myself for getting it done, but I never punish myself for not meeting those goals. I feel like it is counterintuitive to punish yourself for anything to do with writing. Writing should be fun, even if it's your job and, there's a level of stress that comes along with that. It shouldn't ever be something that you attach negativity to unnecessarily. So if you punish yourself for not meeting your writing goals, then I feel like it will create this subconscious feeling that writing is a negative thing, and I don't want to do that for myself. So rather than doing that, I attach positivity to it and reward myself rather than punishing myself. But most of the time, I just do it. I don't reward or punish myself either way. Number 18 is, are there any works similar to your projects that you look for and use for inspiration and or comparison? I don't currently have any comp titles for my work in progress. It is just a YA fantasy, and as I really mold it into what I want it to be, that's going to become clearer to me as to what books I'm most connected to. But in terms of inspiration, really, I just read everything, and whether or not that is something that I'm going to take into my own book, those ideas or those techniques or whatever it may be, I still learn something from all of those books that I read, whether it be something I want to do, something I don't want to do, or something that has absolutely nothing to do with my book. So, I take almost everything for inspiration, and as for comp titles, we'll get to that later down the line. Number 19 is, how long do you wait or how early do you get an editor or hire an editor? I'm not at that point yet with my current work in progress. I am still within the rough draft and first draft stages, and so I'm not sure yet with this particular book because every book is different. I don't know if it's going to take me 7 drafts. I don't know if it's going to take me 2 drafts to get to the point where I feel comfortable having beta readers look at it, having editors look at it, or querying it, or any of that stuff. That really depends on each book. So I'm not sure quite yet, but I would say probably at least a solid second draft before I would send it off to an editor. Number 20 is, if you finished a first draft of a manuscript, tell us how you felt afterwards. Pick your favorite. If you're not through your first draft yet, tell us how you're feeling about it at the moment. I have finished 2 first drafts before of books, but since those were more personal challenges of just finishing the book, my feelings were mostly, I finished the book. But in terms of this one, I haven't actually finished a first draft for it yet, and I can just feel people coming for me, whether it be in the comments or just in their own heads. But I did do a fast draft that included the month of November, and I still had a couple of chapters, though those chapters were pretty extensively planned in terms of what was going to happen in them. I hadn't actually written those yet. And after NaNoWriMo, I realized that I wanted to make a pretty fundamental change that would leave about 65 to 70% of the story exactly as it was, but fundamentally change the other 30%. So I ultimately had to decide if I was going to finish a draft that I knew I wasn't going to use, or just go ahead and jump into the next draft. Honestly, when it comes to what you should do, what the right thing to do in a writer situation is, it's probably to just finish that one draft. But I did ultimately decide to go ahead and jump into a new draft with that change in mind, because I'm just 100% sure that that is the better choice, and so I need to progress that way. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with that. And finally, number 21 is to tag somebody. I'm going to tag Rachael from Rachel Marie Book Junkie and Crislyn from Crislyn Writes. And if you are neither of those people, you're also tagged. But no pressure. If you want to make this video, you can make this video. And if you don't, then you don't have to. But if you want to, you can consider yourself tagged by me. So whether you make this video or if you just want to leave in the comments what your writing process is like, if you have a similar process or a different one to me, then I'd love to talk about that in the comments with you. If you like this video, do leave it a like, and if you like my content, do subscribe. I make videos every single Friday. Look at my description bar for all of my social media links. I do post semi-regularly to Twitter, and I also Instagram sometimes. So I will see you guys in the next video, and thanks for watching. She, yeah, she's,